There's one thing Gaijin does pretty well, and that is making sure that vehicles aren't completely useless. That isn't to say there aren't bad vehicles in War Thunder, there certainly are, but you would be hard pressed to find a vehicle that you simply cannot pull your own weight in. That got me thinking though. There are plenty of videos exploring how bad vehicles are, but what is the worst tank in War Thunder? In order to answer that question, I started by playing the tanks I had the worst experiences with. It would be pretty easy to just point at a low tier AA truck and say, look, it can't even kill anything. But I don't really think that fits the spirit of the question. You're taking the vehicle out of its intended role, shooting aircraft, so of course it won't do very well. I'm talking exclusively about actual tanks, not ground vehicles as a whole. The first and most obvious place to start was low tier France. That area is still pretty abysmal for France, but it used to be even worse. At that point, they had starting tanks so bad they had to be removed from the game. Luckily, I could still play them, so I picked the worst out of all of them, the H-35. The H-35 is incredibly slow, has moderate armor, only has APCR with about as much pen as a 50 cal, and only has 2 crew members. Additionally, unlike most of the other tanks, I wouldn't be playing it spaded. My first engagement saw me fighting a BT-7M, and that told me I was probably on the right track. I fired into the side of the BT, but did absolutely no damage. I did survive the encounter, but only because a teammate helped me. In the next fight, I was engaging an LVT through a narrow gap in between buildings. I did manage to kill it, but only after expending nearly 10 rounds, mostly thanks to stock accuracy. After this, things took a surprising turn. I started to get a decent number of kills. It took a lot of ammo because of the gun, but it made me realize something. The H-35 is very likely the worst tank in the game stat-wise, but I'm fighting players who are just starting the game. I could take out a Renault FT and likely still do very well, which kind of goes against the point of the video. I tried a few more games to make sure, and it was the same story. Even when my brain stopped working against a Panzer III, I still won. I wanted to really feel the suffering of playing an awful tank, so I made an addendum. I now wanted to find the worst tank relative to its BR placement, so I went to 7.7. Here I used the Obel HVG. You might be thinking, it's a stabilized mobile dart slinger. Isn't that thing stupidly powerful? It used to be, before Gaijin nerfed medium caliber APFS DS. With that change alone, the HVG's price tanked, and made it so barely anyone uses it. The HVG's dart does less damage than 35mm APDS, but has a reload of 6 seconds aced. Prior to this video, I only tried taking it out twice, and every single time I die right away. You can hit ammo directly, it still might not kill it. So I took it out, got an up tier, and... that was thoroughly unexpected. The HVG's die right away curse almost got me again, but thankfully, I was moving too fast for the ATGM to pivot. Other games had similar results, so I moved on to the next vehicle. This was the Rooikat Mark 1D, which I had never played before. It's got the same raw deal as the Obel. It has a very low damage gun, but an average fire rate. Unlike the Obel though, it's 8.3 instead of 7.7. Surely that would make it more difficult, right? You know, I never thought it'd be so difficult to find a terrible vehicle. I was starting to feel a bit stumped, but then I remembered. I was grinding Chinese vehicles the day before, one of which was the Chinese PT-76. It is worth noting, I was incredibly tired not trying very hard at all, but I had an awful time using it. Unlike the Soviet PT, the Chinese one isn't stabilized at all, so I played it again. After a couple of games, I had the vehicle I was looking for. The PT is already not a great vehicle. It has stock APCR with low pen, and the ammo is consistently awful throughout the grind. The most usable shell is the heat, but even that has low damage and relatively low velocity. It doesn't have great pen for heat either. The worst issue is the reload rate. The low damage wouldn't be so bad if it reloaded quickly, but the aced reload time is 7.1 seconds. The PT is also fairly slow for a light tank, and has no survivability to speak of whatsoever. With only 3 crew members, a massive ammo rack that rotates with the turret, and armor so thin that 50 cals can easily go through, you will never last very long in fights. Now throw in the lack of a stabilizer, the one crutch the Soviet PT had, and it's a recipe for disaster. Having to wait for the gun to settle killed me so many times. I got so sick of the APCR that I just GE'd the heat. And even with that, trying to get some decent footage for this thing was like banging my head against the wall. So in my experience, the H-35 is the worst tank in the game in terms of raw performance, but the Chinese PT is the worst relative to its BR. If you're researching the Chinese tech tree, I would bypass the PT altogether. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.